So, what makes a transformational therapy session? This is a topic I've been working for many years to discover. I think sometimes having an operational definition of what we're trying to study is incredibly effective. So, I'm going to discuss the difference between having a transformational session and having just an effective therapy session. Now, we all, as therapists, want to have an effective session. Hopefully, you're having that more times than not. So, let me define what an effective session is. An effective session is where the goals of treatment have been met. You are planning, hopefully, with your client treatment outcomes, and you're doing everything in your power to make sure those have been obtained. Fantastic. Keep doing that if you're doing that, because that's one of the goals of going to see a therapist, is that whatever the problem that you're having has been resolved. A lot of times we even think of an effective session as a reduction in the symptoms or a reduction of the problem, and that's an effective session. So, for example, someone comes in and they have anxiety issues, and they say, on a scale of 1 to 10, my anxiety is about an 8. And within a session or two, you have them down to a 3, and everyone's happy because that's a substantial reduction. So, you've had an effective session. In addition to having an effective session, I think maybe we could work toward having a transformational session. Now, a transformational session is effective. You are still meeting the goals that you want to meet, that you and the client have co-developed, because hopefully you're not just creating the goals for the client. The client brings in their own goals, and you work together to create those. So I want you to think of it, there's an effective session, and encompassing an effective session is a transformational session. Now, a transformational session, to me, I'm looking this as a radical shift in how clients view themselves and their situations. So this isn't just the symptom has been reduced, or the problem has been solved, or at least made a little better. This is where the awareness of the person has had a big shift. The way they view where they fit in the world, the way they view themselves in relation to others, or in relationship specifically to the problem, has been shifted so much that it's very difficult for them to go back to the way they were before. And I mean that in a good way. The transformational session is basically the client is having this life-changing moment, this amazing life-changing moment. What my colleague and friend Courtney Armstrong calls the therapeutic aha. It's like something happens, some event in the session happens to shift the way the client navigates the issue they're bringing in and their daily interactions with the world. This will generally leave the client with a sense of wonder, a sense of awe about their life. Now, this is not something that we're able to get every time, but this could also be a goal for us. Instead of mainly just hoping to eradicate a symptom, maybe we could focus on creating this transformation of the client. And in turn, since I truly believe we are in this interactive circularity, a transformation of ourselves. So when the client changes, the therapist changes, and vice versa. The way we get to these transformational sessions is not a focus on techniques and theories. For many years, most of us have been focused on that. I am as guilty as everyone else. I have been, over the years, trying to find the perfect technique, the perfect way of delivering the technique, and, maybe that's not the most important thing. The reason I say maybe is because, well, most of the time it's not the most important thing. I remember back in the early 90s, I was reading this article, I think it was by Michael Lambert, where they were putting down the actual percentage of things that help transform clients. Only 15% of that were accounted for by techniques. Only 15%. 70 to 80% it was a big chunk of what they call client factors. There's some outlier percentages, but that include things like the relationship, the expectancy of change on the part of the client, all these kind of things that really had nothing to do with a specific theory or a specific technique. I mean, that along with the therapeutic alliance of empathy, connection, those things. So as I was doing all this research and really investigating what makes a transformational session, I had to move away from this idea of it's the techniques, it's the theories. And in time, more and more research has come out since the early 90s, and it's shown over and over again. Theories and techniques are important, but that's not what really creates the change. Each client then presents the therapist with a new theory, a new technique in which that they can move forward with. So instead of trying to rigidly fit clients into a certain technique, certain way of doing therapy, we might need to just open up a space for the client to bring their own theory, if you will, of change in, and to honor that. We need to become very flexible. There is such a need for therapist flexibility if we're going to have a transformational session. So if our goal is not only to eradicate all the symptoms, but also to create a shift in how they view themselves, their world, to essentially expand their consciousness about what's possible for themselves and the world in general, we've got to go places maybe that we hadn't expected to go. We need to make a space for exploring the unknown, the things that maybe we had never thought about. Because if we've already got our technique and theory lined up, we're pretty much saying we know what to do. We know how to create change. And that can be beneficial, but at the same time, that means that we're ignoring what the client may be bringing us. We may be ignoring the most important aspect of the solution to their problem, if you will, which they always have. We've got to open a space for their input, their strengths, their resources. But if we're going to act like we're the expert in the room and try to focus on excessive amount of time on problems and things like that, we oftentimes make our clients take a back seat to our theories and our techniques. We don't spend enough time really talking about what's working in our clients' lives. So many of us historically, our intake forms spend more time asking what's the problem than what are your hobbies? What do you enjoy doing? What was something that inspired you before the problem began? To really start investigating what kind of tools the client's bringing. Because we are co-creating a transformational session. We're not creating it. We're merely creating the conditions for that to occur. So in our mind, if we think that in order to help the client, we need to kind of get out of the way, but yet at the same time, a little bit of a paradox, create certain conditions in which the client can begin this process of healing and transforming, it takes a lot of pressure off us that we're the ones that has to change the client. We're doing something to them as opposed that they're interacting with us and we're interacting with them. It also takes a little pressure off the client because instead of them being labeled as resistant or hard to work with, giving them that space to focus on their strengths, their resources, always gives us an opportunity to explore more deeply those unknown areas. If our theory and technique is something that's so very known and we're trying to go into some place that's unknown with something that's known, you can never know what you don't know. And it's in the unknown is where the healing is. I mean, how can you grow if everything you already know? So becoming more comfortable with the unknown is really our first step toward moving toward a transformational session, giving the clients the space to bring all their strengths and resources in, and maybe taking our preferred theory and setting it to the side and just seeing what occurs. Doesn't mean that we don't do our techniques and our theories, but we've got to give an openness for this mystery to arise. And it's in the mystery where the healing is. Just something to think about. When you're thinking about having an effective session, go for it, but see if we can work toward having that transformational session.